So welcome to the second podcast in which UNICEF student volunteers will ask questions to employees of UNICEF the Netherlands. And the theme of this podcast will be communicating the UNICEF message. And the podcast will explore the ins and outs of how UNICEF the Netherlands communicates to the general public, and the challenges around communication will also be discussed. And this interview will be hosted by two master students from Wageningen University and Research. And herewith, we would like to do a quick round of introductions in order for you, the listener, to get to know the people involved in this podcast. So first, I would like to hand over the word to my colleague.
Yes, thank you so much, Malus. So my name is Ahmed Ismail. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm currently doing my master's in communication, health, and life sciences. So at UNICEF student team here in Wageningen, I'm part of the promotion team, which is in charge of communication and promoting the work of UNICEF among students in the city and beyond. The works of UNICEF in achieving some sustainable development goals have inspired me over time, and that actually made me to decide to be a student volunteer. I'm looking forward to this podcast and also to learn more about communication strategies from UNICEF the Netherlands.
Yes, and my name is Marloes, and I'm from the Netherlands, currently doing my master in international development studies. And at UNICEF Student Team Wageningen, I'm part of the awareness team, which is in charge of writing content and organizing events in order to create awareness of the activities of UNICEF. And my motivation to become a student volunteer at UNICEF is because I wanted to support and contribute to an organization that creates opportunities such as education and access to healthcare for children worldwide. And I'm very excited to be part of this podcast and eager to learn more about the way in which UNICEF the Netherlands communicates. And we would like to ask each of you, the UNICEF employees, to also introduce yourselves and describe your role within UNICEF the Netherlands, and also what your motivation is to work with UNICEF.
Shall I start? Hi everyone, I'm Valeska Hoofner. I'm the Senior Press Officer for UNICEF Netherlands. And my main task within the organization is to gain as much media attention for the organization as possible. And I also guard the reputation of UNICEF Netherlands. I'm a spokesperson for the organization, and I train colleagues to also be good spokespeople for the organization. I'm also the link between the media and the organization, and I do many other things. And my motivation to do this is because I want to be part of the great impact UNICEF has for children all around the world. And to be part of that is something I like a lot. So over to Marjorie.
Thank you. My name is Marjorie. I am currently the team lead of a team of advocacy specialists. So colleagues who work towards, who work on advocacy on children's rights in the Netherlands. And the advocacy is directed towards the Dutch government. In my team, there are also educational specialists and people working with youth participation. And I'm also the focal point on child safeguarding for our Dutch Netcom. So that means that I'm responsible that our child safeguarding policy is implemented in the Netcom. And I can tell you later on what we mean by child safeguarding. The reason why I work for UNICEF is I've been a child rights expert for many years, and I've also worked for smaller organizations. But working for UNICEF is great because there are many experts, great experts internationally on children's rights, which inspire me. And being part of UNICEF means you have more influence in shaping policies and laws on children and children's rights in the Netherlands. So that's UNICEF has a unique position in that, and it's great to be part of the work of UNICEF in that way.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for the introductions. We would now like to start with the first questions, which are about creating an overview of the organization. So Hamid will ask the questions in this section.
Thank you so much, Malus. Yeah, we would like to start with, having an overview of the work of UNICEF. So can you share the overarching mission and vision of UNICEF, the Netherlands, with us? And then perhaps we can take this together. So does this mission and vision differ from the UNICEF International? So, and then, how does UNICEF the Netherlands integrate the mission and vision in communication? So I think those three questions actually go together. So that is the reason why I think we can, ask it together.
Yes, well, it's a large question also, and I'd like to begin by telling you what our mission statement is. It does differ from the international UNICEF. Yes, well, so our mission statement is every child can determine the future. Too many children are growing up today in poor conditions. As the world's largest children's rights organization, UNICEF achieves more for more children in more places around the world than any other organization. Together we make a world of difference for every child today and for the future of us all. And that's our general mission statement. It does differ a little bit from UNICEF International. UNICEF International says more, UNICEF works for every child everywhere. What we do is also in terms of the work we do, we make our own decisions as UNICEF Netherlands. So for instance, we choose certain themes to work on, for instance, nutrition or education, COVID vaccines, that's specifically for this year. And that's something we make our own choices in and carry out as well. International, makes different choices and chooses different themes. But we do get a lot of inspiration, of course, from UNICEF International. They have certain campaigns that we use also throughout the year on our social channels, or certain videos they put out that we also endorse. So there is a lot of things that we do our own and things that are similar.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was really enlightening. So I think the last part of the question is that how exactly do you communicate the message? And then maybe to reiterate for people, I was actually, hoping to ask about the themes that you focus on as the UNICEF the Netherlands, but you've already addressed that, which is very fantastic, that you focus on education, nutrition, and this year you focus on vaccine. That's fantastic. But how exactly do you communicate the message of your mission and vision to people in the Netherlands and maybe beyond as well?
Yeah, well, that's of course an important question, because it's important for an organization, for any organization, to think about that. So of course we did that also, and we created a brand book that has this mission statement. We use it as a general document for all of our colleagues, all of the teams within UNICEF Netherlands. So that means that in every external piece that we communicate, we make sure that this message is communicated within an article or a text that we write, or a letter we create, or a campaign we create. We take also sometimes part of our mission statement to write that towards a campaign statement. So you're always trying to integrate what you're trying to portray as a brand in every campaign. So you will see that I mean, I find personally that UNICEF is really strong in doing this. So you find that in all of our imaging and our communication, everything that we communicate is all aligned with the same color, tone of voice, mission statement, etc. So, and that's very important for your branding, and also to create one tone of voice. It's very important.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm actually aware of that because as I've said before, I work in promotion team, and then I usually have the color code of UNICEF off my head, so I can easily just type it out. So thank you so much. Now we are going to be moving deeper into the communication strategy, and my colleague is going to pick it up from there.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, we would like to know to which groups of people is UNICEF in the Netherlands reaching out to, and what is your communication strategy for each of these groups?
Yeah, that's also quite a large question. Because in general, we are the people or target groups that we want to want them to listen to what we have to say, so that our message arrives. It's in general the Dutch audience, of course, but also governments, companies, so businesses, small businesses, large businesses. And within that, for instance, when we start campaigning, we also select certain target groups. And every target group has its own characteristics. So in terms of age, the media they consume, how their economic status, etc., where they live, what their overall behavior is, so that we can target them online throughout our marketing strategy. If there are communication strategies per group, but I don't know, we have so many groups, so many different teams, that it's a bit much to discuss all of them in detail. So yeah, maybe you have other questions to what I just said, or more specific questions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine UNICEF has so many activities that it's yeah, of course it's like quite a general question. Yeah, we were also wondering, because of course UNICEF also works together with a lot of different partners and stakeholders. Like, how do you do you sometimes need to have like agreement upon the message, or how does that process work? Do you also like send out common messages, for example, with a group of NGOs?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to see if I have an example for you. Well, the one thing that comes to mind is, for instance, when we recently we were trying to create a statement on education with as many as 50 organizations. We wrote that statement because we wanted to put it out quickly, so that's why we started writing it ourselves, and we asked other NGOs and organizations to endorse our statement, so that we all of us would create like a big fist towards, well, the government, really. And what you see in that process there is that it's often the nuances that are important in text like that. It's also for UNICEF, nuances are very important. And when it, for instance, comes to certain phrases or to add a word or two, that can make a difference for certain organizations and also for ourselves, whether we are endorsing a statement or not. And sometimes this process can take a couple of days. I think this took a day and a half, which is quite fast. So, and sometimes you just have to decide. It's also for us, for instance, in a campaign that we say beforehand. This was a campaign on Moria, on Lesbos, that others started, and in that campaign we said sometimes, well, you know, now the tone of voice is to the point that we can embrace and also endorse your campaign and put it out on our socials and yeah, that. And then sometimes the tone of voice wasn't something that we wanted to communicate as UNICEF. So then we make a very conscious decision not to do anything with that opinion article or other text they wrote or whatever. So it works both ways. Does that make sense, or is it's a little general?
No, definitely. That really clarifies
Maybe
things.
I can add something.
Yeah.
Because in advocacy, communication is very, very important, and we do our advocacy towards government or governmental institutions that implement policy. UNICEF is quite diplomatic in its communication. Because we also work with the government, and we try to work together to cooperate and to give advice and to keep a good relationship with government. So we have to be very careful in how we communicate certain difficult topics, as for instance what Valeska was saying about Moria. And the migration issue is highly political and difficult, but we feel very strong about it, but we have to be very diplomatic in our communication about that. And we have to also discuss this with our UNICEF counterparts, our colleagues in Europe and in Greece and so on. So of course we make our own messaging, but we also listen to what UNICEF worldwide is saying on that. And sometimes for advocacy campaigns, we work together with other organizations, and sometimes we want to give it an extra push and try to get the public opinion on board. And we make like an op-ed, that's the English word, I'm not sure how to, an opinion piece, opinionating piece in a newspaper, and that's quite difficult to get into it. Well, Valeska knows about it more than I do, but it's this is also a way that we try to communicate as UNICEF towards a larger group of stakeholders.
Yeah, great. That clarifies a lot. Yeah, as I understood from both of your answers, it's very important to stick to the integrity and the values of UNICEF, and also to communicate in a diplomatic manner. So I was also wondering, like, how do you have any advice for students best to do this? Because students might also encounter issues with this. They might also have to decide, okay, what do I communicate? What do I don't communicate? Do you have any advice for the student volunteers listening on how they can communicate? Or how they can decide what to communicate?
Yeah, I think it's always very important to, as a student, to be aware that everything you say is also can affect UNICEF negatively when you how do you say it, when you speak for UNICEF, for instance. So I think there's always a decision need to be made beforehand. Do you speak for UNICEF or do you speak out of your own behalf? That's very important. And the volunteer manager that we have for that is also aware of that and always ready to answer questions. And I think that's also a second point, that feel free to always ask questions when you are concerned about a certain topic, or you think, should I or should I not do this, or how can I be sure that I can put this on my social or whatever. Those and we rather have you ask one question too many, or not too many, but ask 2 or 3 questions, and that you think like, well, you know, I'll just go ahead and do it, because it can affect UNICEF. You know, it doesn't need to be a big effect or a small effect. It doesn't matter, but you always have to be conscious and aware of that it can affect UNICEF. And I think that's the biggest message from my part. Maybe Marjorie wants to add something to that as well.
Well, the way that we come to our positions in UNICEF is, of course, influenced by the advocacy work that we do. So we do advocacy work on certain teams. We are experts on that team, so we know everything about it. It makes it easier for us to formulate a position. So that's also something you need to know what you're talking about if you come out with something publicly, because you can always imagine that additional questions will come up, and if you don't have the answer, that will come across as not very good. And we base our positions on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So if you stick to what the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is saying, you are most of the time you're safe. If it's a clear violation of the UN Convention, you know that we as UNICEF will speak out, and you as a volunteer can speak out more easily than if it's a more unclear situation. But like Valeska is saying, and I'm supporting that, please ask questions, because we are more than happy to answer those and think with you on the best way to communicate a certain position.
Perfect. That's great advice. That's very helpful. And we were also wondering, like, how do you ensure that the messages you send out to the general public are understandable? Because of course the work that UNICEF is doing is very complex. There are a lot of factors involved. How do you make sure that the communication goes out is inclusive, representative, but that you do convey like the whole message? So that it's not like too much simplified in a way, because I can imagine that's like a delicate balance you have to keep. So yeah, maybe you can give some insights on how UNICEF is doing this.
Yeah, it is a delicate balance, like you say, indeed. At the same time, you have to simplify slogans or messages in order to reach a big public and to make sure your campaign is also understood, and also to raise funds for the work that you're doing in order to create that bigger impact for children. But it is always a challenge, and I'm trying to think of an example. Well, maybe this is not an example of how it is a challenge, but more how we. I'm just giving an example. For instance, we're now doing the COVID vaccine campaign at the moment, and UNICEF role is to distribute the corona vaccines for COVAX in 92 countries, in poorer countries, and the whole story on our role into COVAX the program itself, the World Health Organization, and who is doing what. It's a huge story and very complex to explain. So how do you do that within your campaign? Because you cannot campaign on 5 or 6 different messages at the same time. So what we do is we simplified it. Well, simplified it. To say, well, in a worldwide crisis, you leave no one behind, and that is, and to also it addresses to the urgency of why everybody needs to be vaccinated, but it's also general enough so that you can explain in certain parts all the themes that are covering it. So the impact on children these vaccines have in the future, the distribution that we do of the vaccines, the countries that we're vaccinating and why, you know, the arrival of the vaccines, the contracts we're having with flight and boat companies, you know, in order to get all the vaccines around the world. So to just in conclusion, like you use a very powerful and short slogan in order to tell a bigger story. And I'm not sure, this is not a slogan that can cause like any like unbalancing or any, I'm thinking if it could cause any friction or so. I don't think so, but this is just one of the examples I guess I can give you at the moment. But maybe you have another, or have you actually seen anything communication wise by UNICEF Netherlands that you might want to address as an example of how this can be or out of balance?
I think we might also cover that later in the questions. Yeah, and we would actually like to go into some feedback or some criticism that UNICEF has received. So maybe that will be addressed in the upcoming questions as well. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Hamid.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marloes. And then thank you so much, Valeska, for the explanation. It's indeed very complex to communicate. So we're wondering how does UNICEF communicate, deal with the critical feedback that you get from, you know, maybe journalists, maybe concerned citizens or students? How exactly do you deal with it as, you know, the spokesperson for UNICEF the Netherlands?
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen very often. I to be honest, that I receive very highly critical questions. I do receive questions by our webcare colleagues or to the customer service, and of course I answer questions from the media that are not always critical, just general questions on our work, etc. And most of the time I just answer them by myself. If it is a case of that I think, well, this gets a little too critical, or I'm not sure if I'm understanding this in the right context, then I'll ask my colleague who is very knowledgeable on a certain topic that they are addressing, and then we do it together. At the other hand, like I am, part of my job is to be a risk manager and always have an antenna for what could possibly be a risk for the organization. So what also happens, for instance, is that I was notified by a local newspaper who wrote about the people on the street that are fundraising for us, that go from door to door. And the article stated that people from UNICEF were working in a certain area in a neighborhood. And then the journalist supposedly checked this neighborhood and came to the conclusion that it was a scam, so that the workers only were wearing UNICEF shirts, perhaps, but that they weren't working for us. So then I called the manager who is responsible for those fundraising workers, and he said, no, I know for sure we are UNICEF with the shirts. So the journalist is wrong. So you can check that online in what neighborhoods the fundraising will take place. So he said he lied. So and then of course I immediately contact the journalists and say, take it off your website because this is not correct. check your facts, and this is the story. And it actually is a funny story because he then wrote a very positive story on UNICEF, so it was completely turned around. So those kind of cases I also work. So this is another way around of managing all the critique.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think from your answer, you've already addressed parts of the next question I was actually willing to ask, which is related to, potential accusations that you usually have. So we've read about the story of a Somalian American model who grew up in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. And then, of course, supported by UNICEF in December 2020. So she opened social media about, exploitative practices of UNICEF during a time at the camp. So more specifically, she accused the organization for, exploiting people at the camp for fundraising purposes, such as unwillingly being photographed. So even though this might not be related directly to UNICEF NL, but we assume that this is strongly, this is something that UNICEF NL might watch out for. So we are just curious that, okay, if this kind of, from your answer, we've already known that your department is really doing great about, this, and then before you can have less of that feedback, that means the communication is really strong enough. But we are just curious that, okay, if at all there is this kind of case, like how does the organization communicate and respond to maybe exploitative allegation, and then maybe a label related to scandal or mismanagement or corruption? How exactly would you handle that case?
Well, I think Marjorie also wants to explain after me a bit about our child safeguarding policy. But what I can say in the matter on how we portray children is that we do have a strict policy on how we do that. We would never portray children as victims, because it is important, we find, to show their strength, and we communicate from that strength. You also see that translated back into the images we use and the way we use them. And what we also do, and I think that's something very strong from UNICEF, is that we never show pictures of children that are extremely vulnerable, for instance, that are severely malnourished or seriously ill. Also, because the moment the picture is taken, you never know 2-3 days up till months afterwards what happened to that child, and it's not possible to always follow up on every child what happened to that child. So and we make that very, very strong and powerful decision to never portray children in that situation, simply because it's unethical, we find. But Marjorie can explain to you about our child safeguarding policy.
Yes, we have a very strict child safeguarding policy, which means that we have strict guidelines on how we work directly and indirectly with children during our work. So there are many different ways in which we encounter children. In this case, in communication, of course, if we make photos or videos, or if we want to tell a story, it's always about children, and we want to make sure that these children are not harmed by the way that we portray them. So in the case of communication, we always ask permission by the child, but also by the parents or the people taking care of the child, the guardian or other extended family, for permission. So it's by asking them permission, we also tell them why we are portraying them, how it will be used, and they give permission for 5 years. So after 5 years, we will not use the pictures or the videos, we will not, or the footage, we will not use it anymore. And they are able to withdraw their permission, and that happens. Sometimes we've noticed that in the Netherlands. Sometimes young people that work with us, they change over the years, and then they say, well, I don't want my picture to be used again because I look differently or I feel differently, and then we will, of course, we will not use it anymore. So we have, as UNICEF the Netherlands, we have a very strict child safeguarding policy that is also in place when we take field trips. We have a code of conduct which gives guidelines on how we deal with children, and also journalists and partners that come along with us on field trips. They have to sign the code of conduct, so they have to sign to our strict rules. And these child safeguarding policies are also in place in the country offices. So in the offices in Kenya or whatever country, they also have child safeguarding policies. We tend to be sometimes a little bit stricter than the country offices. For instance, on the issue of children on the move, refugee children, asylum-seeking children, because we know how extreme vulnerable these children are. Though they might be living in a refugee camp, they have fled a very violent and dangerous situation, and they are still in the same situation in the refugee camp. And if they might find their way to Europe, we don't want them to hurt or harm their asylum procedure. So we are extremely cautious about how we portray these children. And at the same time, we do, as UNICEF overall, we do have procedures on on corruption and these kind of things that might happen. UNICEF is very firm about that concerning their own employees, and we are also very firm on that one with the other organizations or the NGOs that we work with in the field. So we ask all the NGOs to have these procedures in place, as well as a child safeguarding policy. This doesn't mean that nothing happens, because we're all people, and things might happen, and we regret if people feel hurt by the way we do our work, but we try to improve the way we do it every year, and we are very conscious about our specific role and our specific obligations towards children and their family.
Wow. Thank you so much for the answers. I mean, the answers were very expansive, very elaborated. So we understand that UNICEF collaborates with celebrities as ambassadors in some of their projects, and we would like to know more about this, and my colleague is going to take charge of that.
Yes, because it's well known that UNICEF the Netherlands uses well-known famous Dutch celebrities as ambassadors to promote the UNICEF projects. We were wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the rules of engagement for this in terms of communication and ensuring that the UNICEF mission and vision are portrayed by these ambassadors.
Yeah. Well, the ambassadors are also, since we have our child safeguarding policy created, our ambassadors are also, they've learned about this policy, so they are aware of it. Of course, that you know, it has changed over the years in how they act and behave in the field. Well, not specifically how they act and behave, but for instance on videos, how we are in terms of that, we are a learning organization, of course. So we every time we make a video or put out an ambassador in the field to show the you know, the importance of our work, or to stress a certain topic or an issue, address a certain topic or issue in a certain country, we always learn from every video that is created. I'm trying to think of an example again. Well, for instance, I don't know if you know about that, but there is an award that's being brought out every year, het Vlieg op het Oog award. Yeah, if you translate that literally, then it's a fly on the eye award, something like that. It's, well, anyway, you get my point. But they always look very critically to all the communication material of a lot of humanitarian organizations. And there was a specific year that we won that award because of our film of Cambodia, and it was our ambassador Nicolette van Dam, who was standing in a sawa, in a rice field, with a little boy, and explaining actually his situation without him being able to speak for himself, or to look into the camera and to explain his own situation, or have some sort of interaction with her that was on the same level. So there was lots of things wrong with that film, and of course they were right for critically looking at that film and coming to the conclusion that we made some mistakes there. But I think as an organization, you always need to be aware also of all the communication material that you put out, and as long as you are aware of everything that you're doing, and also evaluate or discussing all the material that you put out in terms of whether it can harm people or it can harm children, of course, then you can learn from it always. So we did learn from it. Yeah. And I think I don't think in the future actually we would put out make our ambassadors travel lots and lots to different countries anymore, because it's also not the time has changed also in that regards. There's a lot of critique on white saviorism, of course. The white ambassador what I just explained, who stands in the field and explains the situation of the person who basically does not speak. And I think times have changed. So we also, as an organization, it's our obligation to look at what our role is in that and how we can make improvements. So yeah, and our ambassadors, of course, are also. We discuss also these things with them. So we have ambassadors that have been with us for a long time. So we also so we also discuss these changes with them. Does that answer your question a little?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually in your answer, you've also answered other questions that we had. So that's great. But yeah, I would like to go a bit more into depth about your point about white saviorism, which is, for the people who don't know it, we mean the false belief that people of color need to be saved by white people. And often in humanitarian or development world, white people are often portrayed as the hero. It would be nice to know a bit more about how UNICEF deals with this, how they try not to portray stereotypes in this regard. Yeah.
Yeah, I've sort of answered this already a little bit by the previous question. Yeah, what I said before, it's just important to always look back at what you produced and every imaging you put out and every video you created. And I'm not sure if this is an example of white saviorism, but another example is with one of our ambassadors. She went to Guatemala, not last year, but the year before that. And you see her speaking towards the camera about a boy or baby boy that drinks coffee out of a bottle, because there it's the custom that they instead of breast milk they give coffee to their babies. Well, you can look at that from a very Western perspective and think like what's going on there, and nearly, you know, cry next to it. And that's sort of what kind of happens almost as well. You know, she didn't ask any questions on at the girl next to her, who was the sister of the boy, but she said in the camera that she didn't know how to respond because it was so bad for the child, etc. And this was also just it was a small clip, and this was just filmed within a couple of seconds and brought out on a video stream online, connected to a newspaper. And later on, I think we should have looked back to that film and discussed that film and said, well, what happened here? Because, you know, I think it was kind of problematic in many ways. But yeah, I find it difficult to say. Yeah, I don't know, Marjorie, maybe you have something to add to that as well. Because, well, you know, I think the main message I'm trying to get across is that, you know, we just learn from every video, and we're trying to be as self-reflective as possible as you know, as an organization. And things sometimes go wrong, but then you still need to be able to learn from that. And yeah, that's all you can do, I think.
Yeah, I think we also try to prepare our ambassadors when they go on a field trip. We try to prepare them as well as good as we can on how things come across and what their work is. At the same time, we do need celebrities or social influencers to tell the larger story of what UNICEF's work is doing, and that is a very we need them, and at the same time we do sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable by using these kind of people to in our communication, and that's I can only say we are all aware about that. It is also part of our child safeguarding policy, and it's something that is changing in the organization. And at the same time, we are very aware that we also need them in our communication to tell the story about our work. I mean, Valeska can go to Kenya and tell a story, but if a celebrity tells the same story, the impact might be a lot bigger. But like I said, it's sometimes quite uncomfortable for us as well. But we understand your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's very insightful. And indeed, I think it's very important to be reflexive as an organization. That's really great, and to just learn from past experiences. And we were also wondering, how can the volunteers, the UNICEF volunteers that are listening, how can they ensure that they are good ambassadors for UNICEF? And also, how can they make sure that the partners, the stakeholders that they work with, that they are also good ambassadors for UNICEF?
Yeah, I think it's also the same answer as what we answered previously when it comes to the student question to what you can do. But I think it's also good to read our child safeguarding policy. I think that's also a good start, and to educate yourself on what that policy is, and also be aware of our brand book and the images we are carrying out. Yeah, I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, and I think you are as a volunteer, student volunteer, you are a great ambassador for our work in the group that you live in your own community. So we are grateful that you are there and that you want to work for our our mission and our organization. And it is good that you can tell the true story about what UNICEF is about, and also to tell other people how important children's rights are here in the Netherlands, not only in the countries far away, but also here in Europe and here in the Netherlands, how important children's rights are for all children. And you are a great ambassador to tell that story as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I speak for all the volunteers that we are also very happy to contribute to UNICEF. That's, at least for me, also my motivation to become a volunteer. So personally, I'm also very grateful for the opportunity, because it's also an experience to learn a lot and indeed, create awareness for UNICEF's mission. Yeah, we would like to move on to the questions about challenges, opportunities, and future plans. So I would like to hand over to Hamid for this section.
Thank you so much, Malus, and then thank you so much, our guest speakers on this podcast. So we have 3 questions in this section, and then we hope it's gonna be short for your time. So we've actually got to know that you learn from the past, and then we just want to know generally what do you see as contemporary challenge in communication, and how do you mitigate this challenge?
Yeah, this is, I find this a bit difficult to answer, because to what challenges, what kind of challenges do you mean?
Okay, so we are considering, problems can come in different dimensions, right? So as you move from one project to the other, so different projects tends to have like different dimensions of challenges that come. But do you see one as maybe contemporary, or maybe a challenge that occurs almost in all the projects that you've executed as a brand? And then if you see that particular problem, how then do you think this can be mitigated? And then we can also learn from that as student volunteers.
Yeah, this is not really part of my field of expertise, really. But what comes to mind to me, if I just speak for my own expertise, so the media management and as a press officer, what can be a challenge, for instance, is that we worked as one of our main themes on migration last year and the year before, I think, also. And what you see is that even though there are millions and millions of children on the move, refugee children, 32 million actually, it becomes more and more of a challenge to get the media interested for this topic, because there is, although it sounds awful, but there is no new news angle to this matter, to this issue. This is an horrific issue that you're trying to get attention for, but the situation is often the same. And say take countries as Syria, take countries or a country as Yemen. Issue of the refugees in Europe is it's a very sensitive and difficult issue. And because nothing really changes, well, not nothing, but there aren't changes, big changes enough to make it newsworthy. And that's the challenge. So then as an organization, you're standing for that challenge. You have the wish through a campaign to get attention, media attention for this campaign. But we notice that it becomes harder and harder to get attention for this topic. So you're trying to, as a solution, you're trying then to be more more creative, think even more out of the box, and yeah, get maybe other people, external people on board to think with you, because you really need to work harder to get to get this on people's minds still.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I think you really did justice to the question. Yeah. And then the next question is, how do you measure the impact of your communication? Because yeah, we can have the message out there, but how exactly do you measure the impact? How do you know when it has really touched all the necessary parts you intend that it should reach?
Yeah, well, we make lots of analysis, really. For my part, we have a media monitoring. So after every campaign or every press release that I release, we monitor what the press release does, the reach, our PR reach, the numbers, basically what media the press release was published in, and also what if the publication took over our key lines that are important for us as an organization, so that you can measure. Other colleagues who are more into marketing, online marketeers, they measure more broadly to to answer the questions that you're just addressed. So that's for them, basically, to answer in depth what they can and can measure.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So yeah, we wouldn't like to ask for pieces of advice for student volunteers again, because you've already given us a lot of pieces of advice that we could choose from. But we would like to take a beep into the future. We would like to know what the communication plans and goals are for the UNICEF, the Netherlands, for the upcoming years.
Yeah, that's also a broad question, but we in general we created these themes for this year that we would like to focus on, our main themes, and yeah, secondly we also have other themes of expertise, we call them. Expert themes that we are focusing on as well, such as mental health, youth skills, sustainability, humanitarian aid. So they come, our secondary focus, and our primary focus is, like I said, education, vaccines, and nutrition. So what you will see from us this year is that we will bring out stories and communication material, and specifically on these themes. So and we will translate that into campaigns, into stories. Yeah, that, and maybe Marjorie can add something for in terms of what our plans for advocacy, because advocacy needs communication as well.
Yeah, on advocacy, migration is one of our one of the focus areas, but as well the impact of the COVID measures on children. So the closure of schools, the negative impact of mental well-being. Well, nutrition is also one of our advocacy themes, as well as child rights impact. So if the government undertakes measures or policies or whatever that impacts children, we want to know how it impacts children. So we will advocate to get a more clearer view on impacts for children, as well as youth participation, which in the level of schools, at home, but as well in the political area. So we have quite a few different advocacy themes that we try to fit in into the themes that Valeska just mentioned. So so it will all have a coherent community communication story.
Right, thank you so much. And then, yeah, we are highly honored to have you on this podcast today. And then, yeah, I wouldn't know if you have like maybe final words, maybe brief that you may want to, tell us as volunteers that we could not have asked you. So maybe final words. Yeah, maybe both of you can just give us final words before we round up this podcast.
I can only repeat what I said, that you are important for our organization as volunteers in the work you do on communication, on fundraising, and also telling the story about children's rights. The work you do in universities, the conferences you organize, that is very important for us, and we are limited in our capacity, so we are grateful for your work on that. And it has also been great for us to be part of this podcast and to tell you a little bit more about our work and also the dilemmas that we find in our work. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to add to that also a huge big thanks for your time and for your interest also into our work, because it's always nice to be able to speak about the work of UNICEF. Yeah, because we think it's a great organization with a great impact for children. So thank you so much to also carry that out for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I think our own appreciation should actually come first, but I didn't know that in your final words, yeah, you would also appreciate the volunteers there. So we really do appreciate you for your time. This podcast has enriched us with valuable insights and pieces of advice that we could actually build upon and then use it to represent the brand well. So we are very much honored to have you here today. And I think my colleague too will want to say one or two things before we would like you to, go and then focus on the other rest of the day, the other task of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This podcast was very insightful. I learned a lot, and I think yeah, you were also able to give us some practical tools and topics to think about during our work as ambassadors for UNICEF. I really enjoyed the podcast. Yeah, thank you so much.